In today's math lesson, we're going to solve advanced linear inequalities. When we're solving these inequality statements for a variable, you're going to treat the less than, the greater than symbol just like you would as if it was an equal sign. So we're going to be using the same rules of solving for a variable as we would in a regular linear equation. The one catch in solving for a variable in these inequality statements is if you have to multiply or divide by a negative number, you will have to flip. You're going to have to turn the less than or greater than symbol to face the other direction. A small reminder hint: get rid of the values that are outside of the parentheses first. After that, get rid of the values that are adding or subtracting. And finally, remember to get rid of coefficients by multiplying or dividing. These are the same steps that we go through when solving a linear inequality that has an equal sign instead of an inequality symbol. So just a quick reminder of how we went through that process. Example 1, we're going to solve for j, where 10 times the quantity of j plus 8 is less than negative 20. Now that I have separated the left side of my inequality from the right side, let's get this process started. So we see here very quickly that we have parentheses and a 10 in front of those parentheses. So we saw in the introduction as a reminder that we can get rid of these parentheses by dividing that 10. And remember, what you do on one side, you do also on the other side of your inequality or equation. The purpose of that was to get rid of the 10s, leaving us with just the j plus 8 on the left side of our inequality. And since we don't have a coefficient anymore, you don't need to have parentheses around the j plus 8. So that is less than negative 20 divided by positive 10, which makes a quotient of negative 2. Now we can get rid of the adding or subtracting values, as we were reminded in the introduction. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. And what you do on one side of the river, yes, you do to the other. So now that we've gotten rid of our 8, we see that j is less than negative 2 minus 8, which makes a negative 10. So j is less than negative 10. And there you go. Example 2, we're going to solve for w, where negative 3 times the quantity of w minus 15 is greater than or equal to 12. All right, my left and right sides of the inequality are separated. Let's get solving. Yep, we have parentheses, so let's get rid of them by dividing off what's in front, that negative 3. That dividing canceled out the negative 3's, creating for us w minus 15 and a negative 4 on the right side, but the greater than or equal to symbol is now a less than or equal to symbol. Did you see how that turned? So we divided by negative 3. That caused the greater than or equal to symbol to turn and create a less than or equal to symbol. So the dividing itself isn't the issue, it's the dividing by a negative that is the issue. So that is the big difference between solving a regular linear equation versus solving a linear inequality. Let's finish solving for w. So now I just have w minus 15 is less than or equal to negative 4. We're going to get rid of the negative 15, the minus 15, by doing its opposite, which will be adding 15. And what you do on one side of the river, you definitely have to do to the other. And the whole purpose of that was to get w completely alone And now that we've got w less than or equal to, what is negative 4 plus 15? Positive 11. So the steps are mostly the same with one tiny caveat. And there you go. Example 3, we're going to solve for t, where the quantity of t plus 4, all divided by negative 6, is greater than negative 2. Okay, I've got the two sides of my inequality separated. Let's get started. Now, in this particular inequality, we have a binomial, two terms, on the numerator of my fraction. So to get rid of the fraction, to get rid of the denominator, what do? We multiply by a negative 6. And what you do on one side of the river, yes, you definitely have to do to the other. The whole purpose of that was to cause my negative 6's to cancel out. But since we multiplied by a negative 6, we see as a result that my numerator of t plus 4 and its relationship to a positive 12, which is the result of multiplying negative 2 and negative 6, has what symbol in between them now? It created a less than symbol instead of a greater than symbol. So remember, the one big difference when solving for a linear inequality is that when you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to turn your inequality symbol to face the other direction. Let's go ahead and finish solving for t. How do we get rid of 4? Subtract it. And what you do on one side of the river, yep, you definitely do it to the other side. And the whole purpose of that was to get rid of the 4's, allowing t to be all alone. And thus, t is now less than 12 minus 4, which is 8. So mostly the same as what you do when solving an equation, just a little different. And there you go. Example 4, we're going to solve for v, where negative 1 times the quantity of v minus 9 minus 2 is all less than or equal to negative 1. There's a little more going on with this inequality than with our previous examples. So we have to remember our order of operations. Before we can deal with the negative 1 out in front of the parentheses, we have to get rid of the 2 that is also outside of the parentheses, because we get rid of things that are adding and subtracting first before we deal with things that are multiplying and dividing in most cases. So how do you get rid of the 2? Do its opposite. Let's add 2 to both sides of the river, allowing these 2's to cancel out, creating for us negative 1 times the quantity of v minus 9 less than or equal to negative 1 plus 2 is a positive 1. Okay, and we'll even notate that that is a positive 1. Now we can get rid of the negative 1 that's in front of the parentheses. And we do that by dividing. And what you do on one side of the river, you definitely do to the other. So now that my negative 1's have been canceled out, we have v minus 9 having to be greater than or equal to a negative 1. Did you catch that? Did you remember to turn your inequality symbol? We divided by a negative 1, so we have to turn that symbol to face the other direction. It was a less than or equal. Now it is a greater than or equal. Let's finish this off by getting rid of the 9, and we do that by adding it on both sides of the river, because that is the opposite of subtracting. And we end up with v greater than or equal to positive 8, because negative 1 plus 9 is positive 8. And there you go. In our fifth and final example, we're going to solve for b, where 1 is less than 8 times the quantity of b minus 15 plus 9. With the two sides of our inequality separated clearly, let's look and see what's going on here. Well, for starters, our variable is on the right side of the inequality instead of the left side of the inequality. But that's okay. This is the same process that we've been going through, where we follow our order of operations to get our variable b all alone. And if that freaks you out, that's okay. We just need to practice. So let's go back and look. What do we get rid of first? Remember, we get rid of things that are adding and subtracting first if they are outside the parentheses. So let's get rid of your 9 by doing its opposite and subtracting it on both sides of the river. Now that our 9s can cancel out on the right side of the river, we see that 1 minus 9 is negative 8, less than 8 times the quantity of b minus 15. All right. Now we can get rid of the 8 that is in front of the parentheses. And things that are multiplying, you get rid of by dividing on both sides of the river. And we did that to get rid of our 8s on the right. As a result, we now have negative 8 divided by positive 8, which is negative 1, less than b minus 15. Let's talk about that. Yes, we divided by 8. We sure did. But it was a positive 8. And because it was a positive 8, this less than symbol stayed exactly as it is, because you only flip this, you only turn the inequality symbol if you divide it by a negative number. It doesn't matter that the 8 that was on the left was negative. It's the 8 in purple underneath that does the flipping, so to speak. All right, let's finish this up. How do we get rid of that 15? That's right, we add it over so that our 15s on the right side of the equation can cancel out. As a result, negative 1 plus 15 is a positive 14, which is less than b. Now, this is one way that you can write your final answer. And if it bothers you to have the variable on the right side of the equation, you can turn this around. You can have your variable on the left side of the equation. However, you have to be very careful when you do that. So in elementary, you probably had something for greater than or less than saying, the monster eats the bigger number, right? So here, if we go back to that, our monster is eating the b, the variable. So if I turn this around, the monster still has to eat the b. If I'm going to turn it around, I have to turn the whole thing around. If you're going to flip it over, you're going to flip the whole thing over so that your variable can be on the left where we usually have it. And that might help you to feel better. These two mean the exact same thing. I expect that most teachers and most digital platforms would allow either one of those answers. So there you go.